Welcome to AV Smackdown, the audiovisual debate show put on to you by Barco. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. What we're going to do is we're going to pit two AV professionals against each other. Actually, today we're going to have a East Coast and West Coast. First and foremost, the best from the West. His name is Mark Coxon, and Mark's pedigree, he's from the West Coast, but he also comes by way of manufacturing and integrators. Welcome, sir.
How you doing, Tim?
Doing well. Good to see you. Also with us is the beast from the East. His name is Chris Netto, and he comes to us by way of consulting and also technology managers. How are you, sir?
And you should be the hostess with the mostest, referring to me as the beast from the East. What's wrong with you?
I don't know. I'm just here.
Love the 80s reference. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to talk about meetings and meeting technology today. And we got our hands on a couple different studies and reports that were done actually by a company by the name of MindPlay. And they surveyed a bunch of folks and did some technology and surveyed and talked about what it was they liked and didn't like about the meetings that they had. And they get into stuff like food, technology, the dynamicness of the presenter, and really drilled down into what it was that made it a meeting successful and what made it a complete and abject failure. Mark, I want to start with you, and I'm going to read a couple quotes here. The first one is that 67% of the study participants said that engagement levels were impacted by technology that didn't work. So, Mark, I'm going to give you the first shot on this. What's the best way to keep that from happening?
Well, number one is to throw a shout out to my channel to hire somebody who's in the daily business of installing technology in a room. I think that helps. I think being trained on product or having product that's enterprise class product makes a big difference, and not going straight to a consumer or a DIY type product in the space. A lot of times people will go for the convenience of something that they know. But unfortunately, sometimes that product hasn't really developed in a way that was made to be used every day in that type of situation. It'd be really cool to go into a conference room and do all of your meetings via FaceTime on an iPad. But the reason people don't do that is because it's not developed for that. It's not stable enough for that. There aren't tools to make that, I guess, scale in order to do that. So, I think first and foremost is making sure that you set a standard and making sure that you, promote that standard across your rooms. So you make sure that the technology is working all the time, every single day in the way that you want it to.
Chris, Mark mentioned the DIY factor of this and FaceTime and things that are easy and in people's hands. From the technology manager's side, right? There are folks who deal with professors or deal with the CEO or deal with high-ranking people in a company that they just want to bring stuff in and just have it work. So how do you navigate that and balance the professionally installed systems that should work a majority of the time with these things that people bring into these systems and go, I just have this on my phone and it should just work.
Yeah, don't do that. Please don't do that. That's the first thing I'm going to say. The second thing is that it pains me to agree with Mark because I don't want to agree with him, but he said something that's very, very important in that, as a person who spent 13 years on site, having that guy on site who understands what AV is does mean something. And it's not, and I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about the team that I was with and the professionals that you work with. When you have an AV person on site, they're going to understand that there's a bigger picture outside of just something that's on your phone, right? You're going to hope that they understand that, and you hope that they're taking the classes and getting, up to speed on what is out there for meeting technology. Now, when you start debating consumer versus prosumer versus professional, I find it hard to drop a consumer device into a corporate space outside of the security risks that the alarms that are going to set off by me, if we hadn't talked about security yet in the first 5 minutes of this video, we need to now. But the fact is that security is an issue when you start bringing in these consumer devices that are not as locked down as a consumer would. I mean, as some of the commercial devices would. In my experience, it's just bad news, man. Bringing in those rogue devices.
All right, we're going to get to security here in a second, but Mark, I want to key off on something that Chris said. He said having an AV professional on site. Yes, that would be lovely. But let's be frank about what the situation is economically in a lot of these installations and in these companies. Folks are paring back on their IT and their AV departments, and the majority of AV professionals that were in their own world 10, 15 years ago are now fully ensconced underneath the IT department. Those departments are being scaled back financially, so they do not have the flexibility to have an AV professional in every meeting. So back to my original question, how do we make those seamless and stable when there's not an AV professional available all the time?
Well, I think you really have to look at the products that you pick. And I think some of the stability issues we see are because people are familiar with certain devices. So if, somebody always has a Windows computer and they come in, great. If there's something there they can plug into, they know how to do that. But if they bring in their Mac and they're used to using that, they need to be able to use that as well. Or if they bring in their iPad, they need to be able to use that. And they don't have a technology person to navigate that. So you need to make sure you're using technology that can tackle all that cross-platform work. And I think that's where people have a lot of stress, right? If I haven't been in a room before and I'm going to bring my iPad in there and I'm going to try to do a keynote, there's a little bit of stress me coming in that room, that 67% of people you're saying who are distracted by tech not working or who anticipate the tech not to work walking in the room. That unknown factor of, will my device work on this system, becomes some of that stress. And I think if we pick products that are designed to work across platforms, that can work with things like Chromecast, that can work with things like AirPlay, that can work with things like your computer or your Mac or whatever you're trying to use to present in that room, you take a lot of that stress out of there, and you also take a lot of that need for support out of the mix, because you don't have this big if-then matrix of presenting. You don't have this, if you bring this, then do that. And if you bring this, then do that. You have one system in the room and tackle all the platforms. And as long as a person knows how to use that one system, it doesn't matter what they bring in. And I think that's really where you can start to take down a lot of those tech support calls where you may need an AV on-site person, but you need a platform that's robust enough to handle all those situations.
Chris, the flip side of that, because he's not wrong, the flip side of that is the more you make allowances for all these different technologies, does that not increase the overall cost of your system, which also goes into, trying to make sure that you're selling this properly and installing it properly?
Contingencies, man. That you try to design with some contingency plans in place, but I think the root of this all goes back to this mentality of good enough. Good enough design is something that runs rampant. And when I say good enough design, what I mean is that just enough to get by. And a lot of this has to do with corporate budgets and the consumerization of AV, where people have it at home. Can we do it here? It's good enough. All right. Your FaceTime is good enough for a conversation, maybe with your spouse, maybe with your kids, maybe with your friends, right? You want to rely on your $1 million operation or $1 billion operation on something that's good enough. That's kind of a challenge. All right. So yes, you're going to raise the costs, because I've seen it. I've seen people go out and say, I need to have this, and we're not going to spend this. We're going to get by with a USB camera on top of a device. And then you see 6 people huddled around a table that was meant for 3, all sharing a microphone that was intended to be only 3 feet away from their face, but now they're stepping back. The things that AV brings to the table in a meeting experience is taken into account: the acoustics, the lighting, right? The hard surfaces that are bouncing sounds, right? Good enough doesn't take that into account. So that's my beef, right?
So how do you get beyond good enough then?
You have to train the people about what's available out there, right? If you were to take a piece of hardware, right, and just put it out there in front of them and say, this is what we're going to use, the first question out of the bean counter corner is going to be, how much, right?
Yeah.
The real question is, how important is the meeting? right? I can give you a box that's not going to be reliable, right? That may have some drops, right? It may be bad Wi-Fi, maybe whatever it is. But the fact is you're going to have an experience with a box that's going to mess up your meeting. You'll never forget that. Now, I've seen it happen both ways, right? You just got to find the right product that is, you know, in a world of corporate meetings right now, DIY is, not DIY, BYOD is the way that people want to go. And which means that they have a comfort level with their phones, with their tablets, with their PCs. So the box that's there needs to be with an appliance mindset. It needs to be able to do one thing and do that one thing well. That's all they're asking for.
So let's get into security for a second. And Chris,
Sure.
I want to start with you on this. Mark mentioned, the Fortune 1000 company that you're pitching to. Let's also bring in, an elephant in the room when it comes to security, and that's the government. Whether it's the DoD or the Department of Energy or, the White House or what have you. These are people who are incredibly concerned about the security of their presentations and of their rooms. All three of us can point to certain companies that have had, black eyes over the years when it comes to network security. So when it comes to the security of a meeting and of a meeting space, how do we best sell that portion, that part of a system to the ultimate end user?
You better be patient. That's the
Okay.
first thing. As a reseller, as a manufacturer, speaking as a, somebody who's sitting there on the other end listening, or hearing about the product pitch, you better be prepared to hand over your product and be prepared for it to be scrutinized, and it will not happen overnight. The confident, integrator and manufacturer who can hand over a box and allow the thing to be basically dissected, there is no way the federal government, the DoD, hospitals are going to accept anything without a long list of tests associated with it. There is a lot of sensitive information for obvious reasons in the government and then obviously in the healthcare side of the business that, lends to that. You just can't get by with shoddy security. And for me, it's going to require shootouts. Bring in every device that you can get that does that particular thing, every widget. And I will put it, if it hasn't, here's the thing, 10 years ago, not 5, maybe 10 years ago, when, it became apparent that the RJ45 LAN connection was appearing on everything that we were purchasing at an Infocom show. From that point on, you better have a device that can be picked apart, taken apart by a security professional, by an IT side of the business, because anything with that port is open. So, yeah, it's going to require a lot more in-depth work than the guy who just knows acoustics. You now, have to bring in your partners as a former end user and technology manager. Yes, I got to bring in my main guys who are going to basically shoot it with bullets and see where the holes are. It's not 100%, because every day there is a new person, born who will learn how to rip apart a system. And that's just the way, the nature of things nowadays. So you got to continuously develop. You just don't hand me a box and say, here it is, it's Rev A, and think that I'm never going to do that. You have to continue working and developing and thinking that this thing is vulnerable as an integrator, if you're selling it, as a manufacturer, if you're building it. So that's what I would like to see from these companies.
Mark, Chris mentioned HIPAA. There's also the student version of the Federal Education Act that protects student data. You've got the government. You've got state and local governments. You've also got law firms who, let's be honest, deal in sensitive information. Right? You have Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 1000 companies that deal in financial information, and you have accounting firms. The list goes down the line of folks who are concerned about their information, their presentations, getting outside of those four walls of that conference room.
Yeah, well, I'll have to take a slightly different approach to what Chris said. I mean, he said patience is key. Not saying it isn't, but I think flexibility becomes the ultimate piece here with security. And the reason that it does is you just mentioned, 17 different environments that this stuff lives in. And everybody's got their own IT departments and their own regulations and their own, they're required to make their best effort to make sure these things are secure, which is a very vague requirement by HIPAA, right? That you have to make your best effort to keep data secure. Which means really if there's any doubt in your mind that it's not, they could prove that you weren't, and now all of a sudden you're liable. And I think, with these environments, I've worked in military environments and law firm environments and things before, as well as HIPAA environments. There will be times when you can't have a USB launched solution. You have to be able to launch that solution from an image on a laptop, or you have to be able to launch that solution from a server somewhere on site. There will be situations where you may not be able to join that to the network at all, right? Where they want it to be completely standalone. That's why hospitals have guest Wi-Fi that never touches their in-house Wi-Fi. You'll have situations where you can't have rogue Wi-Fi access points. So you can't put a device on the table that has a Wi-Fi and radio in it and leave it turned on. So you need a way to be able to join that to a network and use their existing wireless access points that are already secured and firewalled in order to facilitate that communication. And if you don't have a product that can do all of that, if your product just pushes things through the network and you're not allowed to put your product on their network, then your solution isn't a solution that fits enterprise-wide, right? And then what we have is we have a hodgepodge of systems, and now we're back to this original point that technology doesn't work because nobody knows how to use it. If I go in conference room A, I do this. If I go in conference room B, I do that. If I go to site XYZ, it's completely different. So if you really want to tie all these things together, to have this consistent experience that works, you have to have a product that not only is secure and has gone through all the testing, all that kind of stuff, but it needs to be flexible in these environments. You need to be able to use it in several different ways, just like you are across platforms, in order to make sure that that's a product that can be used in that enterprise or in that vertical.
So let's get back to the manufacturer part. Mark, I want to stay with you for a second. Chris, we'll come back to you on that. Mm-hmm. How do you go back then to your manufacturers? You both work for Barco. If you find a situation where, this didn't do X, Y, or Z, or it did, but we had to do this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. How then do you feed that information back into your manufacturing cycle and say, hey, can we add this?
Yeah. So for me, and I'll tell you, I've worked for a couple different manufacturers, so I'm not promoting one over another. For me, it has to do with company culture and how open that product development cycle is and what your access is to those engineers. And if you work in a company that has open access to engineers and has access to product development team, those things get back there very quickly. I'll give a real world example. I was at a company the other day where they use an inventory software on all of their computers. And anything that gets plugged in, it's kind of a software inventory piece. And anything that gets plugged in gets inventoried. So if you plug a USB key in the side to load a file or anything like that, before you can access any of that, it has to go through an inventory process and check what's on that drive. Now that can cause a delay in your meeting setup, depending on what kind of technology that you're using. You may have a 60-second delay before you can start sharing anything or before you can launch a file from your USB drive. So you need to have access to those engineers. For me personally, the great part was that we had dealt with this a couple times before and we'd already figured out the workaround for that. But it's having a manufacturer that has that open process, number one, and also working with manufacturers and people that will take the time to sit down on a case-by-case basis and make sure that the technology is working in a way that works best for your facility. Because if they understand your challenges, then they can take that back. If for some reason you're working with a technology that you don't have access to someone at the company, and that person at the company doesn't have any access or influence on product development or engineering, then you're lost, right? So you really need to find those companies that have that culture, who put that support in the field, and who also have that culture to allow the field team access to the people who are doing product development.
Let's wrap up here, guys, real quickly with one last quote here
Sure.
from the report. 58% of the respondents said that they wanted a meeting that is quick and easy to set up. Mark, we'll let you start with this, and then Chris will give you the last word. What does quick and easy mean to you?
Wait, don't go any further.
What?
58%. What were the other people thinking?
They don't care. I don't know. I didn't do the report.
Yeah, I think we both take umbrage with 58%. Shouldn't 100% be quicker?
Hang on. The other 42% actually like being in meetings all day. I don't know.
Yeah, they have nothing better to do.
Exactly.
So
they go for the bagels and donuts.
There you have it.
I'm going to dovetail two things together because Chris made a point to say that he didn't like devices that were consolidating things down. The all-in-one became a point of failure, and you're asking about quick and easy. So let me say two things. One to circle back. Quick and easy, number one, means the same every time you use it. Right? If I have to relearn a user interface every time I come into a room, it's not quick and easy. Right? If I need an if-then chart to know which system I'm operating, not quick and easy. Right? So number one, we'll just go there. Number two, let me tell you about one room that I did for the military that wasn't quick and easy, where we had 4 people around the room that all wanted to share onto a common screen so they could do some sharing and collaboration on a big smart board up front. What they had to do, they had multiple cables running back to a matrix switch. The matrix switch would determine who got to share and who didn't. The matrix switch would feed a quad tiler. The quad tiler would then have to be programmed to show 1, 2, or 3, or 4 people on the screen, depending on what they wanted to see. So not only do we have all that, we have laptops with different resolutions. We have EDID that's being transmitted or not usually. EDID should really be called EDidn't because it usually doesn't.
No, he didn't.
Sorry, my stint for the day. But we have all these problems, all these points of failure in the room, right? So for me, quick and easy is I don't have this big matrix of things that I need to control. I don't have to have 18 different cables running to a switch that's going to cross-point these into a tiler that pushes them into a device, into a screen. If I have a device in the room that can talk to 10, 15, 16, 64 devices all at once, that can allow me to choose which of those devices I want to show on a single screen, and that will actually scale those and negotiate EDID directly from the display without having to negotiate it with each and every single device that tries to connect, my meeting just became quick and easy. I just dealt with this the other day where a guy called me and said, hey, Mike, can you do something on your end on a projector that'll make my HDMI come through this receiver that's not passing the resolution that we want to send? No, I can't, because your switch is in the way. Your switch has now become the point of that equation. So the more that we can take all those intermediates out, the quicker and easier it is to use things, and the more reliable meeting technology becomes.
Every time he says quick and easy, I'm thinking the Flex Seal tape guy. It's quick, it's easy. You're gonna saw a boat in half now too, dude? That'd be great. Sorry. I had to.
No, okay. So, but back to whether it's a Flex Seal or what have you. What does quick and easy mean to you, East Coast?
Well, quick and easy. You can define quick and easy as the equipment in the room or the experience. Which one do you want to take?
I would say the experience, since you're talking about the report again was going back and asking the people that were actually participating in the meeting. So the actual experience.
Quick and easy is on-off switching to the handful of people that's in there, and your equipment, interacting with whatever device is in the space, and showing what you need to do, and you're in and out of there. The failures in meetings came, within the first 5 minutes, and people start panicking, right? Now, what
about hang on a second. What about the meeting that doesn't happen in the first 5 minutes? What about the annoyance of meeting is going fine, and then 15, 20, 25, as soon as the prisoner gets to the penultimate point or a cliffhanger point, and then suddenly something happens?
That sucks. That's
all you have is that sucks?
That's tough, man. I mean, you can plan all you want. There's going to be some hiccups. And I think part of that is we as AV people do not want to see a hiccup. I keep going back to, I struggled with this one particular laptop, this one particular build, and it kept giving me hiccups until we found out that there was a problem on that. I've had to take the device that's not typically associated to AV, and I had to track down what the problem is, and there it was. It was every time that they plugged into an outlet, it was emitting a weird signal through the laptop that was throwing something off in the room. God, man, it's so tough on the other side. I get what Mark's saying about the easiness of it, and as somebody who spent the time trying to build out these rooms to be easy, no matter how much I simplified it, it got tough. Huddle rooms are a byproduct of easy, right? The whole existence of the huddle room was to replace what the AV guys used to refer to as the hang and bangs, the presentation room, right? And what made huddle rooms popular was the fact that they were purpose-built, one purpose-built. That is the easiest you're going to do. The more features you add, I'm not against the all-in-ones, Mark. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love ordering products from late night TV about, that can cut and slice and dice my salad all and cook it all at the same time. Not that I want to cook salad, but you understand what I'm saying. These all-in-one devices are not a bad thing, right? But when you start putting in too many parts and moving parts, it becomes a problem, right? So a purpose-built room is going to be the best and easiest solution, and that requires design, not just the product. You can put the products through the ringer, like I said before, hand them over to your technical team, let them tear it apart, let them pick it apart, right? But at some point, you got to pull back on those feature sets. It's not going to make an ice cream sundae. It's going to display your device.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you both so much for joining us. Mr. Mark Coxon, how do people find you?
At AV Phenom on Twitter. I do some writing on Rave, or if they want to talk to me about what I do every day, they could find me at Barco.
All right, very good. And from the East Coast, Mr. Chris Netto, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I want to do this again, Tim.
All
because
right.
I don't like
You're
that.
not done yet, are you?
No, he took my freaking lunch, dude. What do you?
Literally.
I don't miss lunches, as you could tell.
Yeah, me neither.
And there it is with the backwards H. Anyway.
The backwards H.
You can find me on Twitter at Chris_Netto. That's at Chris_Netto. You can find the company I work for at www.barco.com. Do people still use www? I guess.
All the time. They just don't know.
Not all the while.
All right. Thank you both so much. This has been AV Smackdown brought to you by Barco. My name is Tim Albright. If you want to find me on the Twitters, TD, Tim David Albright. But thank you both so much. That is all the time we have for AV Smackdown.